Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Talking about albums containing riffs. I'm one of your riff hosts, Austin Paulson. With me are my other riff hosts, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. What's up, guys?
Just hosting riffs. Anytime someone starts to play a riff, we have to be there.
We have to host it.
Right. Announce. Excuse me. Riff here. There's a riff.
Maitre D, riff.
You know, it's like Lloyd Kaufman showing up in like a trauma film. He's just going to be there. He has to be there, right? It's like,
right.
Just appears out of, stage left or something.
I was watching a while back. He's in the fucking Suicide Squad sequel or whatever, just for like 2 seconds. And I was watching it with somebody. I was like, that's Lloyd Kaufman. They were like, that one man who's just briefly in frame, like 100%. I'd recognize that man anywhere.
Good old Uncle Lloyd.
Everybody's got a pervy uncle that buys them beer for the first time, and that's him.
That's it. He loves a good smut, and I'm here for it.
Not even good smut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say what we're talking about today is pretty good smut. There's a lot of smut on this record.
Nah,
not this one.
Nah, I swallow.
I'm excited to get into this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Me too.
This is not a band I have like a ton of history with, really, but I do remember songs from this album being played a lot when I was younger. We'll get into that, but we're of course talking about Angel Dust, the 1992 record from Faith No More.
Album number 4?
It is, yes. I don't really, I don't listen to a lot of the earlier ones, like the first 2 records a lot. I have.
Introduce Yourself and We Care a Lot.
Yeah.
Was the first 2.
Right. Which also features some re-recorded versions of at least the main that We Care a Lot. But I feel like the albums that I've spent the most time with are going to be for sure The Real Thing and this record. And they are so different from each other. I wanted to talk about this record because I think it is, personally for me, it's the better record. It's maybe a little bit more challenging, whereas like The Real Thing feels a little bit, I don't know if dated is the right word, but it feels definitely of a time, and it kind of sounds pretty consistent all the way through, where this record's just all over the fucking place. But I'd love to ask you both, have you listened to Faith No More much in your life? Have you listened to this record before? What is your relationship with Faith No More?
I'll go first because mine's a short answer, and that is not really no. I've heard Midlife Crisis a bunch, just from having existed in like the 90s, and wasn't it on like San Andreas?
Yeah, it was on San Andreas, which I found out later. I didn't own that game growing up, but I had
Vice City.
Oh, okay. I didn't have a PlayStation, so we didn't get that right away. But
gotcha.
I did have Tony Hawk's Underground 2, and that was the first time I ever heard Midlife Crisis. So that was like, this is fucking weird as shit. And playing as Bigfoot on a skateboard. And I think I wonder if I had already heard this band. I'm sure I heard Epic before I played that game. But as far as this record is concerned, that was like my introduction into like maybe something outside of that. But Dylan Adams, you have the floor. Where have you heard Faith No More or this record?
I am 100% positive I saw the video for Epic early on, based off of VH1 did a series probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, like top 100 heaviest bands or best bands in hard rock. Faith No More was on there. And it was like a 5-minute blurb where they're talking about the band, and they talked about the video Epic for what it was, the controversy surrounding it, And they also did, VH1 also did a series called 100 Shocking Things in Rock. And it was about the video and how it got banned from airplay. So that would have been the first time I heard it. But the most, I guess just growing up and hearing that track on the radio and like classic rock radio and modern rock radio and buying the real thing used at a Hastings Music. And hearing that from out of nowhere, Falling to Pieces, which are the opening 3 tracks of the record, the cover of War Pigs on that record, that's really good. But also, we'll get into this too, and I can't fucking wait. I grew up a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Big record for me was Californication. And realizing, this guy kinda sounds like Kiedis a little bit on this record. And then going, this is a lot better than a lot of that band's like earlier and later output, and I'm far more interested in this. But then I heard Angel Dust. I got a greatest hits comp for this band, and I heard the singles off of Angel Dust and went, this sounds like 4 different bands. There's nothing on here that sounds even close to what the real thing sounded like. So I dove in. I probably bought Angel Dust when I was 17, 18, somewhere around there, and just dove headfirst into this wild basket case of a fucking record.
I like that you brought up that it sounds drastically different from the real thing, and that is very intentional. They, definitely exploded with the real thing, primarily with Epic.
Second single for the record. And it was kind of like an accident, because I think the first single they released for it, which I believe would have been Falling to Pieces, perhaps.
Yep, that's it. Didn't do as well as they thought it would. Then the label was like, just pick a song that you want to do a video for, and we'll do it as a single. They did Epic, and it was like the breakthrough hit. It was like, it peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. Of course, the video is great. Yep.
Bjork's Fish.
Apparently, maybe Bjork's Fish, whether they stole it or it was given to the band. I don't know. That's like always a story that's got thrown out for it. But I mean, that album went fucking platinum. They toured the fuck out of it. And I mean, they were basically on the road for like 2.5 years. They played with a lot of different acts, primarily like Metallica. They went on tour with like Billy Idol, and I mean, it was a crazy year. I mean, this record was very popular. It also got nominated for a Grammy Best Metal Performance, which they lost to Metallica. Won.
Yeah, go figure.
They appeared on Saturday Night Live. But yeah, for the most part, they just went on tour a lot. Like I said, Metallica, they went on tour with Soundgarden, Voivod for a while. Billy Idol, Robert Plant. So lots of different and weird tours.
Okay. So this is like, Mike has been in the band for 2 years.
Right.
He can't have been doing the Mike Patton things on tour yet. But I just, in my head, I'm like, he's on tour with Robert Plant, member of Led Zeppelin. What type of shit could he have been doing on that tour? And Plant's just going, what the fuck is happening? What is happening? I mean, just the drinking the piss out of his shoe stories, like shooting water on crowds of people. Like, Jesus Christ, could you, just the sheer shock on Robert Plant's face would have been a price of admission for me.
Oh, sure. I wonder like how those initial, I didn't really come across it in like the research that I was doing, but to basically go from your like high school band, Mr. Bungle, and then join Faith No More and fucking, become like MTV darlings with like a hit record, and you're opening for some of the largest acts like at the time. It'd be pretty crazy. But what I will say is that playing these songs to death every night for 2.5 years certainly took its toll. They were just like fucking over it. And they got back from, all of that live, those live dates, over the course of a few years. And I think they just like, they took a break basically. They didn't do shit for like, I think they were writing certainly, but they didn't really like do anything for about like a year and a half before like actually getting to do this record.
And wasn't it during that time period where Mike went back to Mr. Bungle and they recorded their debut record,
They
right?
did. Yeah, 100%.
Man.
So, which, this band being on a major label, Warner, they're like, well, we got this.
Sure.
We got this ace in the hole with Faith No More. This guy's in another band. Let's sign Mr. Bungle. Why not?
And that record releasing to the general public, that whole band's catalog, which I love. I love every album that band has put out. That is the literal like description of shoving a tool chest down a flight of stairs. Is that band? I mean, that's like playing Bop It on speed. Like it's just that's that type of band. I mean, going from hearing Epic on the radio, which is a very catchy anthemic track, and then hearing quote unquote for the first time, or like My Ass Is on Fire or Squeeze My Macaroni for the first time, which is just bonkers shit. I was listening to that album on a trip one time, and I just had it blaring in the car, and the person in the passenger seat was like, "You're going to have to turn that off. I'm having a panic attack." I was like, "Yes.
This record also sounds pretty similar. Like you're literally having some sort of like you're just it's very stressful, and there's a lot going on. There's lots of layers, lots of different sounds to convey that just like unease. Lots of unease on this album.
I was gonna say, I guess only having really listened to this album, you said they like actually the band picked the Epic as the second single from the album before this. It's very surprising that they like picked a song that would be very mainstream, like have mainstream success, and not just like the weirdest fucking song that they could possibly have picked as a single.
Well, that record didn't really have a lot of weird songs. Like that's what's strange about The Real Thing is even I think there's a couple of them that has like maybe some moodier parts, but like there's nothing weird on that record.
No, I mean, I never really heard a band like this by the time I got to it, with like the keyboards and like that sort of like funky kind of groove. But yeah, that record is pretty straightforward for the most part. It doesn't really like kind of deviate from the formula like this record does.
And I think the story with that record, before we hop off of it, is the band was done writing it by the time Mike joined the band. So Mike just kind of came in, put lyrics to it, kind of like Brian's, first record with Thou, really. They're just like jumping in, like, here's the lyrics, the songs are done, have at it. So that record sounds very reminiscent to the band's first two albums, very much in the same vein. I've always kind of considered that as like the end of one era, and then with Angel Dust, you get the beginning of the Mike Patton era. Yeah,
it's cool that, this is certainly him coming into his own. There are so much about his performance on this record that I love, where I'm like, it's primarily the vocals, the way, like, sometimes, like, I think when I listen to The Real Thing, the delivery of that is like, it took me a while to kind of get into it. Whereas his vocal style on this record is all over the place. There's like a lot of range to it, but it has more of an edge at times. Even this, like the more soaring kind of like traditional singing parts he does are like noticeably better than the first record, in my opinion. But we'll get into all of that. But this is their fourth record. Like I said, got pretty tired with the kind of direction of things that they were touring, playing those songs, wanted to step away from that completely. Let's talk about the lineup a little bit too. We got Mike Patton on vocals. You have Big Jim Martin on guitar, Billy Gould on bass. Yeah, Station. That may have also been some of the first introduction to the band.
Of course it is. It probably is mine too.
Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, just randomly Big Jim Martin, which I thought personally, having seen him in the movie and some of the imagery of like the photos of the band, I thought like Jim was like a huge part of this band, and he's not an original member. He kind of joined maybe just a little bit before Mike did, and then this is the last record he actually does with the band. So he's only with them for like a handful of records, like We Care a Lot, The Real Thing, and this album.
I'm glad we kind of got off on the tangent about that movie, and it just kind of jogged. I think the first time I ever heard about the band Faith No More, there are some live stills, I think, from the Master of Puppets tour.
Oh,
where
sure.
Hetfield's got the cast on his wrist, and he's in that classic white Faith No More shirt with the weird star emblem. That might be the first time I ever saw the words Faith No More.
Yeah, they were always, obviously pretty big about, being billboards for other bands. And maybe some fans know. Yeah, like basically the drummer of this band, Mike Puffy Borden, was like a childhood best friend of Cliff Burton's. Like they basically were like, chose their instruments together. There's a quote that's like, Cliff's like, I'm going to play bass. And, Puffy's like, I'm going to play drums. And so they've been in multiple bands together. Yep. There's like Easy Street.
Easy Street. Yeah.
What was a couple other
Agents
ones?
of Misfortune?
I think I know Agents of Misfortune had Jim Martin in it as well.
Yep.
I don't know if Puffy was in that one, but they were definitely in. I wonder if this was like I'm assuming this is a Rush stroke, but Fry by Night.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
Yeah, so very weird.
It's like Spastic Children.
Also, there's a connection there. Some of the members of this band were in that, but yeah, I mean, Mike Puffy Borden, longtime friend of Cliff's, Jim having some connections there. I think actually Cliff was the one who recommended they get Jim and put him in the band. And then Jim was the person who heard the Mr. Bungle tape, the demo, and was like, we should see about getting this guy as our vocalist. We also have Roddy Bodden on keyboards, of course. I would say, and Dylan and I have kind of talked about this off air a lot, is that Billy and Roddy are I don't even know if they were the people who initially formed. They were original members of the band, but I think there were some other members who formed it like when they were like initially in San Francisco. But these guys also childhood friends. They grew up in LA together. Then they moved to San Francisco to go to Berkeley, and they just like kind of fell into this stuff. But I would say this is Billy and Roddy's band for sure, 100%. They are kind of like the core songwriting components of this band, which completely makes sense because when I think of Faith No More, it's just like it is a bass band to me. There's so many like cool like bass parts all over these records. So that definitely shines through. So I would say that 4 out of the 5 guys are really stoked to try to go in a different direction. One guy in particular is not about it. Jim Martin,
stoked.
He is a stick in the mud. He probably had disdain for every part of this process, from the name of the record to what it sounded like, the recording process. There is so much available that you can watch. There's literally that 3-hour video of them behind the scenes, like MTV, like it is in the studio with them recording the whole thing. And he is just so passive about the whole process.
Austin, I hate to cut you off. You actually didn't even mention that Billy was in the band.
Oh, I did. Did I not?
Did you? No, you went from Roddy and we went into that side story.
Oh, you're right. Okay. I forgot to mention Billy Gould. Yeah, Billy and Roddy. Billy, of course, I didn't know this. Dylan, you kind of said it off air as well. Billy's like in a bunch of different shit. And the what was the name of that band that Dino's in? Oh,
Brujeria, I think so.
Yeah,
the concept behind that band is their first record's like a grind record, and I mean essentially all their catalog is, but they're apparently all part of the Mexican drug cartel. Like that's the story.
Gotcha.
And they're all in it. Like Dino was in it. Raymond Herrera from Fear Factory was in it. Jeff Walker from Carcass is in it. Shane from Napalm's been in it. Multiple people have been in this band. And to kind of tie that together, I mentioned a couple guys from Fear Factory. Billy was on a Fear Factory record called Transgression from like 2005, 2006. So it all ties the room together, dude.
Yeah, there's like Mike Borden was like, he was in Ozzy's backing band
for a long time. Yeah.
I think he collaborated with like Primus at some certain points, Black Label Society. I don't know if he was like a live drummer for that band, maybe briefly, but
I think he was in it the same time Rob Trujillo was in.
100%.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. They're all from that same area. The Bay Area is just like incestuous, kind of like New Orleans.
And then also performs on the solo Jerry Cantrell record.
Dude, is he on Degradation Trip or is he on Boggy Depot?
Oh, I don't know. I am not sure on that, but
because those are rad
he's certainly on a record for sure. But yeah, you have all of these members. I apologize for not mentioning Billy before, but yes, 4 of those 5 members really stoked to kind of write and like take risks and experiment a little bit. Jim's not about it. I watched a lot of stuff. I read a lot of stuff. There is just like so much happening. And, part of me kind of also understanding a little bit maybe why this is occurring. Apparently his dad had passed away before the recording of this record. But yeah, he just really was not happy about the sounds of it. And also, too, I'll say, recording an album, I would not want to be fucked with in the way that like a recording, like the TV studio kind of crew just constantly recording everything and asking you questions and just like, can I record the record? But I mean, he wasn't even showing up to rehearsals for it when they're kind of like bouncing off ideas off of each other. So I think the writing was kind of on the wall as far as like him probably not being in the band for much longer after this. We'll get into that a little bit, but yeah, he was just like all of that. There's so many different like little like bits and pieces from like Kerrang magazine that I was reading. I'm like, man, this is bad. This is so like he would be dogging the record during he's in the band.
Oh, yes.
They'd ask him questions about it and he's just dogging it completely. Like, yeah, I don't really care. Like the name, I hate Angel. Like if it's called Angel Dust when it comes out, you knew it wasn't me who picked it, basically. Like wild shit.
No. And you mentioned that like he's not even really there, which when you hear the album, there's not a shitload of guitars on it.
I think there are definitely some really great riffs on this record.
Oh, it's there, but like if you compare it to the real thing, like that's a guitar record, right?
Yeah.
Like it's all there. It's huge sounding, and there are songs in particular that are on here that are massive, like Jizzlobber being a big one. But every other instrument is really up front, and the guitars are kind of subtle and only used in different more as a texture and not as a forefront instrument.
I would agree with that. 100%. And so, yeah, that certainly could have lended to him just like being a passive member of the group at this point.
As a fellow stick in the mud, I identify.
We needed it. We needed a stick in the mud for this podcast for sure.
Oh, how do you guys like this record? I don't like it.
I don't like it. All right. Well,
I don't like it. All right, we're going.
Done. So they recorded this album from January to March of 92. They did this at Coast Recorders and Brilliant Studios in San Francisco, California. One thing for sure that they kind of mentioned, with this album in particular, having like the backing of a major label, they had more time to record things, a little bit more time to experiment. Whereas like the previous record, obviously they needed a new singer, and he wrote his lyrics within like 2 weeks of being in the band, basically. So. They recorded, at Coast Recorders. It was like kind of it was like an old school recording studio from the 50s, and it was kind of smaller. So it's like they kind of compared the recording studio of the previous record, Studio D. This was like a much tighter, kind of smaller room, so it's a little bit like punchier, I guess. They mentioned the gear just sounding different, having a different like sonic quality to it, but. Mike Wallace, producer, engineer, mixing. He produced all of the records before it. I believe he also would produce their Soul Invictus album that was like released in 2015. But
that's their most recent record.
Everything leading up to this record, he had a hand in.
I didn't know he did the Possessed demo. Holy shit.
So that was interesting. Obviously being a Bay Area band, you're going to probably run into a few of those connections with some of the thrash metal world. But yeah, prior to Faith No More, he produced the Death Angel Heavy Metal Insanity demo from 83 and the Possessed demo from 85.
Now, I'm sorry, like this is going off on a tangent, but like the dudes in Death Angel on their first record were like 16. So they were like 12 and 13 on that demo.
They're so young, going on like those big tours with like Metallica and Megadeth, and like they're just like a bunch of cousins in their like, family band, basically.
I mean, hell, Kirk produced one of their records.
Yeah, did he produce the Geffen one? But yeah, so there's a little tie in there. A lot of the record writing process, as I mentioned, starts with Billy and Roddy, Mike also as well, just kind of spitballing some ideas. So they do drums first. Then they go to Billy, Roddy, and then Jim and Mike kind of come in with their like parts and vocal stuff. So, interesting interesting recording process with all of this stuff going on. One of the first songs that they previewed for the label executives is Malpractice. So you can imagine having a record like The Real Thing and being like, oh, great, the boys are at it again. They're going to bring us The Real Thing too. We're going to have another massive platinum selling record on our hands. They show up with Malpractice. And that is such a fucking insane thing to like walk in and show like, it's like, yeah, this is what we've been working on for the last few months or whatever. And it's like, fuck. Actually, there was a line, quote from a label exec or like a manager was like, I hope no one bought houses. Like they genuinely thought they were throwing away their career with this album. Like it was that much of a drastic turn from The Real Thing.
It's so funny to hear that now, because if you listen to this album in a mix of maybe albums from hell, even that year, this isn't that foreign, really.
No, it's not.
It's not like, but I guess when you compare it to The Real Thing sounded closer to like stadium rock than this ever could have. And the record labels are going, you had a gold record. That means the next one's probably going to go double platinum. It did, but not in this wonderful, interesting country.
I guess we should probably just get into it. I would love to, Swindle, this was your first time listening to this all the way through?
Mm-hmm.
What was your first impression of this record?
Bass.
Okay. Yeah.
Bass.
Yeah.
Tight. Simple.
I was thinking today on my listen through that this album is like if Tom Waits' music was a lot more guitar centric.
Yeah.
This would be that album.
That's
like if it were rock and roll Tom Waits, like
I like that.
This is what that would sound like.
Yeah, that's a really cool descriptor of it. I've never even put that together. Yeah, that's good. That's solid.
I especially thought that that's the note I took for RV.
Damn. Yeah.
The song RV, I was like, this is Tom Waits if there was a guitar and Tom
100%.
Waits.
That
right.
Deep ass voice having Mike Patton. Like there's so much of that on here.
There are fucking points on this record when I first heard it. I was like, he's doing the Bobby McFerrin thing. Like there's points on here where Bobby McFerrin.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't worry, be happy. That track.
Oh,
every sound on that track is his voice.
No, that was that fish, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the Billy Big Mouth Bass. Yep. I saw plenty of those as a kid.
Sure.
Every time I walked into a Cracker Barrel, there was one, right?
Ties the room together.
There are points on this record where Mike is literally doing vocal scats, and it's like, oh, it's the Bobby McFerrin thing. And I think it's either Jizzlobber or Crack Hitler that he like ramps his voice up so high and he's screaming.
Yeah.
And it's like the hair on the back of my neck just like stands up.
It's just like such a refreshing thing. As I mentioned, like sometimes the vocals on The Real Thing, it doesn't really quite even.
It's a little
like
too standard, right? It's a little too just like traditional.
This is just great. He's definitely, as
part of the team
now. So, I mean, he got a chance to really stretch his talents on that. But I mean, he's also, now that he has time, he's also contributing musically as well. So I'm sure obviously that dictates how the record is going to sound and everything. But yeah, first song, Land of Sunshine. This was released as a promotional single for the album. The lyrics for this were written during kind of like a bout with some experiments with sleep deprivation.
God.
So just get tired as hell and try to like come up with like lyrical themes. So he's pulling from fortune cookie lines, like literally just, the little bits of paper, like just getting all of those phrases out.
You will get your dick ripped off tonight.
He's like, yeah, I just bought bags and bags of fortune cookies and took phrases from them. Literally, that's literally the quote. Life to you is a dashing, bold adventure. Sing and rejoice. Fortune is smiling upon you. You have a winning way, so keep it. You are an angel heading for a land of sunshine. Pat yourself on the back and give yourself a handshake. So those are a few of those. He also took some of the questions that are featured in the Oxford Capacity Analysis, which is the the questionnaire for the Church of Scientology. So there's a few
Oh,
lines
my God.
from that in there. Do you feel sometimes that age is against you? Does emotional music have quite an effect on you? Do you often sing or whistle just for fun? Swindle would answer yes, 100%.
Dude,
Loves to whistle, big whistler.
does Cody get all of his lines from fortune cookies? Like hearing that, I was like, yes. Oh my God. Like just in knowing that, reading that information, because I found some of the same articles you did.
Sure.
And just reading that and going, this is such a good idea. It's almost like he shook a bag of them, dumped it out, and went, here we go. Put it in a row.
Some of the other lines as well, loved some late night TV. So you can definitely kind of hear that on song, like here's how to order, like all of that certainly comes through. But the song itself, I mean, we get right into the fucking album. Like it just starts and that fucking bass line is so sick. It is so great.
Yeah.
And it's
What a line.
So Billy has a very interesting technique. Billy plays really fucking hard. The reason it's cutting through so much is like, yeah, he's loud, he's in the mix, but he is digging in so hard with a pick that there's only certain points on the record you can actually hear the roundness of the bass tone. Like you can actually hear the traditional bass sound because he is beating the dog shit out of those instruments.
Does he? I may have seen this. I watched like a lot of their MTV stuff because again, they were just trying to promote this album.
Yeah, there's a ton of
very
it.
hard. They're on MTV a lot. There's actually like I think one of the performances like hanging with MTV, and I think I saw maybe where he is using a pick, but he's also like somehow like I think he's also using his fingers for certain parts as well.
I'm sure he is kind of locking in with that for like subtleties and everything. Absolutely. Billy was endorsed or is endorsed by a company named Zon, Z-O-N basses. And they use a carbon fiber graphite neck. So the neck doesn't move and it's very bright and brash sounding. And he's basically said, oh yeah, I beat the fuck out of these things. And if they hold up just fine, there's no movement. He's like, cause I hit them hard and you can hear it on the record. Like he is cutting through hard. I bet the mixing for that had to be just insanity.
They balance the stringed instruments really well because a lot of times when the bass is like during this first song, when the bass is doing that hard bass line, the guitars are just like kind of downstroke 16th note power chord kind of deal. Like one of the things is doing really simple stuff while the other is like
right.
Yeah,
definitely kind of holding down the foundation of everything.
Not stepping on each other's toes for sure.
Jim does have like a solo on this song. Like he solos a bit. Like he definitely is able to kind of shine in certain moments. But yeah, he definitely, like you said, is kind of more of a textural type of thing. Which also, speaking of textures, I mean, Roddy's keyboards are great.
Dude.
There's so many different like soundscapes, and it gets progressively stranger as we go through the record as well too.
The keyboards at the beginning of Be Aggressive are terrifying.
They
are terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like I'm wearing a Castlevania shirt. It's like you're fucking walking up and like you're kicking on Castlevania 64. Like it's terrifying. I love it. This is like a great soundscape record too.
Definitely. There's a lot of different sampling going on, especially in this next song, Caffeine, which just opens up with like a zoo or just animal sounds.
It's just Mike.
It's like I think Roddy had gotten like, if I read right, Roddy had like this sampling keyboard that he got maybe like a few years prior, and he didn't really know how to use it at first, so it didn't like make an appearance quite yet until this record. And so he had just built a collection of different shit in this like kind of box or whatever. But I also read too where I think whatever the tech was that he had all the samples like saved in apparently was like stolen the first day that they were supposed to do it, and they like were looking everywhere for it, and like a homeless man had come up to him and was like, I have what you're looking for, and he just like somehow stole the sampling thing, and they were fine. They got it back, but it was like such a random like little story I read in an article. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting sampling going on.
Gene Belcher.
Thank you. I was going to make the same joke. Yes. Just anytime the Bob's Burgers theme comes on, like it kicks in and there's that one point where he hits a button, it just goes whack. And it's my favorite thing ever.
Just walking around recording stuff so that you could just annoy your parents with it on the keyboard.
What's the King of the Hill bit where the band moves next door and he has to go in and he goes like unplugs all their shit and the one guy's a keyboard and they've sampled him going, I laugh at Tony Danza. I laugh at Tony Danza. I laugh at Tony Danza.
I think this is a good showcase of Mike's vocal range too, because it goes from like very aggressive to those like kind of soaring, kind of like I want to say like operatic, I guess, but it's just so great, so wonderful. I think what I also mentioned too with this, Swindle made a really good point with like, I think you can there's a lot of like simple structure to a lot of these songs, but then maybe there is like a wild bass line or something. Or what I know particularly with this song is that you could take it at like surface value, like, oh, here's like just a driving riff, right? Yeah. But then maybe you listen to it a few times and there's just like all of these little like details and like little sounds going on for sure. Lots of atmosphere.
It's really hard to pick out a bad track on this record, in particular, because it really is like a compilation record, right? Because every song sounds vastly different, but it still has kind of an overarching theme of just being weird. And it's weird in the good way. It's not weird of like, get that away. It's like, it's like watching a movie, it's kind of like watching, it's like watching Psycho Goreman for the first time. You're like, I just have to see more of this dumb shit. Like, bring it on.
I think what gets, and maybe we could touch on this a little later too, but I think this album, especially when it came out, I feel like a lot of people thought they were just being contrarians, like to be like, now we're doing something different just to like be different. And it's like, no, we just made the record we wanted to make. We're actually like weirdos. Like we're actually very weird people. This is what we want to sound like. This isn't just because we're trying to like alienate a bunch of people.
In that giant long form video of them recording, Mike Patton's eating a sandwich for 35 minutes when they're talking to him. That is one of the best comedic things.
One of my favorite parts of this whole thing, and it is also very Thou too, where they just like, there's like almost
lie to everybody.
There's just there's a lot of lying and like a lot of jokes being flown around, and maybe just like, yeah, we're here, but like, yeah, Mike is literally eating just a fucking turkey sandwich for like 30 goddamn minutes, just like while answering like questions with his mouth full. Or
what's your favorite? What band do you listen to right now, Mike? I really like Godflesh.
Yeah, just like, awesome. But yeah, lots of great bits. If any, there's a lot from like old MTV like interviews and also like the behind the scenes shit. It's a fun time. Like sometimes they just are punishing these journalists, and I'm fucking here for it. It's awesome.
There's great, many years later, but there is great like compilations of videos of Patton screwing with live people, like people that are filming sets and all sorts of stuff, like being a terror just on stage. Like there's at one point he's like, I got to do something, shoves the mic in his mouth, climbs a camera arm and keeps climbing it till he gets to the top of it and like stands on it and just goes back down. And yep.
We move on to the lead single for the record. May 25th, 1992, Midlife Crisis. This is their only #1 hit on the US Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart.
That's insane.
Reached number 10 on the UK singles chart. This is about Madonna, or it was at least the working title for sure was Madonna, but they essentially wrote it with her kind of being the background of, I guess, the song is based on a lot of observation and a lot of speculation, but in sort of a pointed way, it's kind of about Madonna. I think it was a particular time where I was being bombarded with her image on TV and in magazines, and her whole shtick kind of speaks to me in that way, like she's going through some sort of problem. It seems she's getting a bit desperate, is what Mike Patton was saying. maybe one of the most notable things about the song. It apparently is the only song in history, in pop music history, to sample both Simon and Garfunkel and the Beastie Boys together. So
Oh my God.
you have the drum track for the song contains a sample of the first bar of Cecilia by Simon and Garfunkel. This was like Roddy's doing. It was like he said it was like one of the first songs he heard as a kid. So there's like a bit of nostalgia there. And then the bridge features a sample of Car Thief from the Beastie Boys as well. And then I also found there's like literally, again, just kind of how random these samples can be. There's like one part where there's just somebody yelling. And this was apparently from like a kind of like a sampler, kind of like almost like it's like a bonus beats thing. It's by this new wave or no wave electronic group called Conk from New York City. And they just like, I got to have this yell like right here. This is perfect. So like just kind of random sampling going on. But it got a music video. We also got the music video, which was, I think, partially censored when it first came out because there's a guy being like, it was with the horses, like tied to horses and letting them.
Oh, he's been drawn and quartered.
Yeah.
Essentially.
They didn't air that part of it on. They had to edit that out. But
That's the William Wallace thing. That's the Braveheart thing.
There you go.
The opening of this track it's obviously like a sample or something playing under the drums. It always makes me think of Swindle. The name is slipping me right now, but the Alice in Chains track that has the great kind of drum intro.
No Excuses?
Yes. I always think it's No Excuses. It'll play on like some sort of like playlist. And it's like, oh, No Excuses. And then I hear it kick in and it's like, oh, this is not that at all.
It's kind of funny that you say that. There's some like vocal harmonies in this that I noted sounded very similar to Alice in Chains. So it's funny that for a completely different reason, you brought up the same fucking band.
This it doesn't surprise me that this is the single. I think this might be like the most straightforward song on the whole record. It's the least strange, but this is just always stuck with me ever since I heard it playing a Tony Hawk game. But Swindle's favorite track, RV.
I mean, this is such an interesting like track, and when you describe the band, it's just like, oh yeah, we're just a bunch of weirdos and we like this shit. This track there's no better representation than this track. I mean, it definitely seems like an old man sitting in his recliner watching some old wood paneled TV. Just thinking about all the shit that upsets him or he doesn't understand and that everybody else is wrong. And that's what's so fun about the lyricism of the song.
Yeah. I guess inspired by I think Mike was like driving he like was in a dive, like in the town. You just kind of sitting observing all of these people. And so thus you kind of have like this persona. And there is that a lot on this record, which I do like. He's kind of like, maybe kind of like writing these characters and singing from the perspective of these people. But Wild Side, this is certainly when the album starts to kind of go off the rails a little bit, for sure.
I love multiple lines in this song. They're quotable, but the ending line, I should speak to my kids more. I'm going to tell them what my daddy told me. You ain't going to amount to nothing. It just clicks. It's done. Yeah. It just fades off. But it's a very like lounge kind of like song. It's like in 3/4. It's a waltz. It's like, God. And the bass playing is perfect. All the keyboards and the guitars just interplaying. It's very much, and you hear more of this style from the band on later records as well. But it adds this weird kind of post-punk kind of lounge music to it. Great track. I love it. The older I get, the more I kind of observe humanity from afar and just go, oh yeah, this makes way too much sense.
Smaller and smaller. So you go from a track like RV and then you go into this kind of like slow tempo, like metal hardcore riff by old Jim Martin. I would say to add that this is like a bass band. One thing I think this is maybe just a rhythmic band, like it's very percussive. This record, like, Puffy is like I would say he is also, if you look at some of those live videos, he's hitting the fuck out of the drums. Like he plays so hard, but he's great. He's all over this thing. I think certainly like the yelling and screaming by Mike Patton on this is a standout as well. I don't know. What do you guys think about this song?
I love this track. I think, again, I think when all the other tracks, there are so many tracks that stand out for different reasons. Maybe this one doesn't jump out immediately from the pack, but it is still a really good track. And I've always thought that more hardcore bands or more maybe straightforward sounding heavy bands should listen to this album and kind of take note with the subtleties of how they use really heavy, aggressive riffs on this, because they don't abuse it. So it makes the impact of them that much more impactful, right? Like they hit harder when they come in. So like you've got 3 to 4 tracks on here that hit like this. And this is just a really good representation of, oh, we're doing this different sounding thing because we want to, but we still have this element as part of our sound.
This is like one of the few parts of the album where like the guitar and bass are doing the same thing, but also the piano is doing the same thing as the guitar. And that riff is cool. I think the song is in like Phrygian. It sounds
the Hetfield scale.
I think they also like, I looked at Wikipedia, but they had like working titles for all the songs, as every musician does. And I think they called it like the Middle East song or something, like that was their working title for it. And this was the song that I think I messaged y'all like a week ago, and was like, the last third of this reminds me of Baroness.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yes. What about it makes you think of Baroness?
Maybe it's just like, I think this is like one of the riffier songs on the album. And there's a lot of noodling guitar work. And that just reminded me of like Red era or maybe Blue era Baroness.
It'd be fun to talk about one of those records.
We'll never know.
Yep,
Nope.
never.
Might as well never do it. Apparently they've only played this song like once, from what
That's
I saw.
bonkers to me.
They've only
'cause
done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I saw the quote correctly, it was like if you play live, you might want to just lean towards like playing more energetic songs, keep
Right.
people in it. And I think that's maybe why they just kind of have avoided playing it. But yeah, apparently they played it once, from what I read, October 14th, 1992 in Blacksburg, Virginia. And that's that.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
All right. On to the next one. Everything's Ruined.
Great song. Love the song.
Oh, I love the hook in this. This might be, I think the hook in this is a little bit more reminiscent of maybe the Real Thing era, just with just how it's phrased. It obviously, the track doesn't sound like that era, but I love it. It's definitely a different kind of spin for the band too. Again, just a great track. There's no other way to say it.
The verses on this song are so percussive because I think he's like doing slap bass during the chorus, and there's piano verse. There's piano during the verse, but also the drummer is like playing the rim of the drum instead of doing like hi-hat. Instead of keeping time on like a hi-hat or a cymbal, he's hitting the rim of the drum instead. So it's a very percussive sounding verse.
I love how this band locks in with the rhythm section. I love the fact that Billy and Mike lock in so well together. That just comes from years of playing, and also shows the type of musicians that they are and the type of band, the fundamental of it. There were a lot of bands in this era that had that relationship, right? You could make a comparison to another Bay Area band that's very drum and bass centric, which would be Primus, right? No matter what drummer Les is playing with, he can lock in a heartbeat. And Billy, albeit maybe not an extremely flashy player, plays some really fun lines and some really creative lines and tasteful lines, and knows when to lay in the pocket, knows when to lay back, let the other instrumentation, the melody, the vocal line kick in. But man, he can lock in with Mike really well on these tracks.
One of my other, so this is the final single for the record. One of my other favorite parts of it is the video.
Oh, I love it.
So Kevin Kerslake, who I hope I pronounced that correctly. He also did the video for Midlife Crisis, and his like kind of body of work consists of like, you know, he did the Travolta video, or the quote unquote Mr. Bungle, Too Many Puppies by Primus, This Love by Pantera.
Jesus.
He did a bunch of videos for Nirvana, Come As You Are, Lithium, and Bloom version 2, Silver. He's worked with Smashing Pumpkins, Prince, Dinosaur Jr., STP, and a bunch more. He also did some of the live like concert kind of films like Louder Than Love, Motor Vision, Nirvana's Live Tonight Sold Out, Ramones We're Out of Here. So he has like all of this crazy background. And so it's funny because they basically spent all of the Warner budget on some of the other videos. So knowing that, they purposely were like, well, if it's going to be cheap, we should just make it look as cheap as possible.
Oh, and it is.
Yeah. And they're just basically in front of a green screen the entire time.
Is this the video where like Billy's in like a full-fledged like winter coat?
I think so. Yeah. It's just goofy as hell.
There's an old NoFX video that's like that. They literally went to they were on tour. They went to a mall or one of those like corner stores that did those like karaoke style video things. And they're like, we have $20, hopped in the room, turned it on, green screen's going. It's like a bunch of cars behind them. And they did a video that way.
It definitely reminded me of that. Cause it was like, oh, if anybody's been to a Chuck E. Cheese, there was like a part where they have like the camera and like all the kids can get projected on the thing. Like, oh my God, I'm in Rome or whatever. Like it's crazy. So funny. I like the song a lot. I think this is great. Then we get to the fucking depraved song that Malpractices, which is just about like invasive surgery. Like I think he's touched on this in a few different songs throughout like his career, maybe some different bands, but yeah, like I interpret it as like maybe someone who likes the feeling of hands inside them. Kind of, it's very unpleasant.
Some Cronenberg shit.
Yeah,
this is a
100%.
Mike Patton track if I've ever fucking known it to be.
It's great. It's got like that weird fucking like industrial sounding kind of noisy intro in the beginning.
That's that fucking Godflesh shit they were all listening to.
Yeah. And we get some like more like chuggy kind of riffs. And there's like a borderline hardcore riff like on this fucking song. What was that song?
The song, I think that industrial part at the beginning is in 5, and most of the rest of this song is in 7.
Like it sounds just completely just otherworldly. It sounds completely abnormal to what you would think the rest, because the rest of the record's probably in like 3/4, 4/4, 6/4 here or there. But like when you start playing around with 5s and 7s, shit gets a little weird.
I'm glad this was the first song that they showed people that work at the record label,
because you could have showed them Midlife and it'd be like, okay, I like kind of get it,
dude.
Make them sweat.
You know, those knuckleheads are in the studio and they're like, what do we have to show the record label? Hey, this one.
Yeah,
this
100%.
Not already knowing they've got Crack Hitler and Jizzlobber like in the can. They're like, this one.
Fucking Billy's bass sounds crazy on it. It almost sounds like a bell being like, it kind of reminded me of like that Anthrax cover of Got the Time.
Oh yeah.
With like, it almost sounds like a gong kind of thing. So cool. Yeah. And it's just it's pounding. There's like some of the noisier stuff. It sounds like someone's literally trying to like break down a goddamn door.
You know, it's with the noisier stuff and kind of the weirder leaning music on this record. I think a lot of people have somehow put it together that maybe Mike was the person that introduced this band to the weirder side of music, when in reality they were already all into this shit. Like the all of the heads that write that write most of the music in these bands already were into that. I mean, Mike was in Mr. Bungle, and they wrote really abstract, wild music. Roddy and Billy were into probably a lot of like no wave, funk bands, all sorts of just wild abstract shit as well.
I'm sure they were listening to like Swans and shit.
Oh,
whatever,
absolutely they were. Diamante Gallus as well. I think they sample it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the more like the orchestral part that kind of sounds like
it's the Shrieking Woman samples.
Oh yes, that
Diamante
one.
Gallus.
Yes. Yeah, that's crazy. Yes,
yeah,
100%.
And I'm sure they were listening to a lot of that stuff, and with the Bay Area kind of being a melting pot of just all of these different forms of music. I mean, there's points on this record. I think Mike sounds like Nick Cave.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like an RV in particular, that big croon that, and if you go on and listen to some of his like solo work, there's a project he did many years ago called Mondo Cane, and it's him just singing Italian, like traditional Italian songs in Italian. And it's like, all right, it's hard to beat this. Cause like if I was having dinner with the man, it's like, it's over. It's over, it's over.
Kindergarten.
Oh, I love the lyrical concept of this. The line of I don't fit as, or something along the lines of I don't fit as well on the swing anymore is it's so good.
It's like clearly
everything's a fable.
This person has like clearly grown up, but they still think like all of that shit's meant for them. Like, I don't remember the water fountains being this small. And they're like, all right.
John Candy going into the school in Uncle Buck, having to stand at the urinal.
Just, I thought you were, isn't it a Billy Madison one too, where he's like,
he falls backwards.
He's like trying to hug the urinal, but they're all like, kid size. Great. I think this song's great too.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool.
The Meatloaf sample. I didn't know that was in there.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was a direct reference to that or not, but it kind of reminded me, and somebody had also made that comment as well, where there's a line in the Meatloaf track, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, where it's like an actual baseball announcer doing the kind of play-by-play of a kid getting to,
going to second base.
Where and this is kind of like a deranged version of that for sure. The one thing for sure that kind of sticks out too, the kind of a continuation of that like rap, maybe like new metal thing that they were kind of.
Yes. They're kind of guilty of helping usher in.
Right. So, certainly a Korn or a whoever could have heard this, I'm sure. It would have
absolutely.
Been like, that groove, that cadence is certainly there on that.
So we kick into another really depraved track on the fucking record. Be Aggressive.
Be Aggressive.
This is not a song about fellatio at all.
Not a bit.
Not a single bit.
No funny business.
No funny business. No one is no pop shots, nothing. This is not a Val Venus finisher from the WWF in 1999. It's not the money shot. It's nothing.
Yeah, this is a Roddy song.
It is definitely a Roddy song.
Yeah, this is a song that he wrote the lyrics to. I think it's the only song on the album that Mike didn't write.
But Mike is passionately hitting those lyrics.
Oh, he sure is.
This is a great track. I like the cheerleader chant in the middle of it. I love that part. Even the fact, if you really listen to it, a couple of them are off. I like it. I like that too. Again, those haunting keyboards at the beginning of it.
Those Vincent Price ass organ.
Yeah, absolutely.
The rest of the fucking song, he sounds like a baseball game organist for the whole rest of the song.
And it's very funk driven. Like the guitars and the bass are very funk driven.
The way it opens with like kind of horror music kind of sounding organ, and then just on a dime transitions to like a baseball fucking organ, kind of like bluesy rock kind of thing, this old school thing. So funny. Like that transition, I was like, what? I remember when I was doing a listen of this record, I was like, hold on, hold the phone. Let's go back really quick.
I also noted, kind of going to what you were saying, Dylan, during the verses and choruses, the guitar, at least one of the guitars is like noodling the entire time, but like, I just lose it. I forget it's even happening because it's not playing like a riff. It's not like a repeated thing. It's just like, just noodling. And 3 verses in, I was like, oh yeah, the guitar's actually been playing the whole fucking time, and I like completely forgot.
And there's a vocal break, I guess, technically in the bridge that is just Mike doing a cappella, just with keyboards, and he's just singing "I Swallow" in these layered vocals. It's like, God, you can write a very poetic and well-structured and written track with lyrics as depraved. Hey, why are we talking about? It's not depraved. Everyone either enjoys sucking dick or enjoying getting their dick sucked. Like, it's not a big deal. And like, this is just a very well-written track about it.
Hey man, it's not a big deal, Swindle. Swindle freaking out about it.
Good track. This might have been the first track from the record I heard.
I didn't say nothing.
I like how you phrased it though. He was just like, it's not a big deal, all right? Like he was talking to one of us, like, guys, put your shirt back on, guys. It's not a big deal.
Matthew
Like
McConaughey.
He just caught it happening to one of us, and he was trying to like.
It's okay,
Hey, man.
He's trying to talk us down.
Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. It's okay. We all do these things. It's all
There's
right.
definitely not other songs on this album about getting jerked or jerking things.
No.
No,
It's
it's
cool.
all
You know,
it's all even keel.
There's Dancing with Myself, She Bop, Long View, a lot of different songs about, tender loving.
Tender loving.
There's a Tyler Childers song about jacking off.
Did not know that.
There's a Beatles one too, right?
4 of them, right? Oh, that's what Zelda the Four Swords was about, right?
This is the what?
There's a Zelda video game called Four Swords. It's just about the Beatles,
It's about the Beatles.
In a room together,
Like eyes locked in.
looking each other in the eyes.
Just
you-
painting a canvas.
I'll
you
never let it go. That's
A
awesome.
small victory.
Can you pass that lotion over there, John?
Sure thing, Ringo. I can't wait for that scene to come up when they do the. That's when they all interlink because they're doing all the 4 separate biopic movies. They're all going to interlink again when they just the circle jerk.
Right.
It's my favorite scene in the movie. 100%.
That's the crossover. In
Oh,
all
yeah.
the movies.
Because you'll be looking at it from their perspective when you're like
Right.
Oh,
This went off the rails real quick.
yes, it did.
A small victory. maybe my favorite song on the whole record. It's catchy as
Yeah.
fuck. I love this
Yes.
song so much.
Yep. This is a very melodic, the vocals are great, the vocal harmonies are great, the hooks are great. The bass is playing fundamentally a supportive role the entire song until the very last point that they play the motif that plays throughout, the bass kicks in, and it's just like, wow, the impact of it. And hearing that lead line has been stuck in my head for a couple decades at this point.
This is the second single that was released for the record, and apparently it was later remixed by Youth of the Killing Joke and released later the same month when they put out the single. Interesting little thing there. Their last single to chart on the U.S. Billboard Modern Rock Track chart, peaking at number 11. Also has a video as well. Different director, Marcus Nispel. He worked with Billy Joel, the B-52s, LL Cool J. This man also directed all of these are the remakes: the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003, Friday the 13th from 2009, and the Conan the Barbarian from 2011. So that guy.
One of those is a passable movie.
Well, yeah, at least one for sure.
One of those is. I want to talk about one of the B-sides on this single, which is their cover of Let's Lynch the Landlord.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
I finally got a chance to get around to listen to, and I was like, this is perfect. Because it's just done very like rockabilly, like old school country kind of thing. Like, okay.
Yeah. I thought you meant you never listened to the Dead Kennedys song before.
No. I love that fucking record. Speaking of depraved things and 2 things that I never would have thought I would have read together. Crack Hitler.
Yeah. What a
song.
track listing for that. You just see like, oh, okay, that's the song on here. Apparently written from the perspective of a dealer the band had talked to who compared himself to Hitler. I've read that somewhere. And its working title was Action Adventure because very clearly sounds like a fucking James Bond thing with the keys there.
This sounds like it's Primus's biggest inspiration, this song.
So I'm glad you said that. There's a point in the song where Mike's like, I'm something like you would call a crack Hitler. And that makes me think of the end of Tommy the Cat. Tommy the Cat is my name. And here it is. Do, do, boo, doo, boo, boo, doo.
It sounds like Mike is like doing a speech at like a rally. Like his vocals sound like it's coming through a speaker and not like normal song vocals.
Like there's a filter on it or something.
Sure. Right.
Yep.
I mean, it'll transition briefly into, like a march or like a chant type of thing in a crowd. I thought the song also sounded a lot like Shaft.
Oh my God. Like the Shaft
with a guitar
theme?
with a wah. There's like clearly like
Yeah.
some sort of like wah that's like
Right.
on it. Yeah, it sounds kind of like Shaft with like some of that guitar thing or even a Van Halen part and a like intro of that song, but mainly Shaft.
This might be arguably the strangest song on the album.
Yeah.
I mean,
arguably, I feel like you could probably say that about most of them. Be like,
probably
Brothers
all of
I'm
them.
like, yeah, sure. I think there's an argument for.
I mean, and the bass on this track is really prominent as well.
Yeah, that like slap bass thing.
Yep.
God damn.
Oh man, but then we kick into this is my favorite title on the record because it makes me think of the beginning or the scene in Silence of the Lambs.
Okay, because it's
Look at the
swamp.
blonde. Like that's what it makes me think of. And this is absolutely the heaviest track on the record. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Oh yeah, there's some. Well, we got to say the name of the song.
Just
Slobber.
Yeah,
I just matter.
it's like a Guar cover, right?
Yeah, definitely not about Crank and Hog. Not one bit. Yeah, I would say like after the kind of outdoorsy, swampy kind of soundscape stuff, there's like some of the biggest fucking guitar like sustaining chords on this whole fucking song, and then also the fucking dissonant keyboards that kind of play like the Psycho theme, where it's just like very stabbing. Yeah,
Yep. Or that Matt Berry quote that I shared earlier this week. Sounds like early electronic nightmares.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
Also, Mike's vocals sounds like there's a chorus or a phaser or something on them.
yeah. I just thought they were like mixed, so like the gain on them is like so like it's almost like it's like peaking, right? So it's like you're fucking distorted, but it's like that like the entire fucking
The bass is
song.
like doing these walking lines that don't repeat in it as well, and they're hyper distorted on top of him playing hard. Everything was pushed in the red for this track, mentally, physically, thematically.
There's some other cool riffs on here. I mean, there's like a lot of maybe even some Slayer influence on
Those
this track.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%. The vocal thing that he does towards the end of the track that is like into borderline like death and grind vocal kind of territory where he gets really high and he's in the back. It's almost layered in the back and he's screeching. God, that is one of the most chilling things on this record.
How about the way the song just like fades out and then you get like a church organ choir that just fades right into it.
Again, another scary moment of the record.
Then we have kind of to round out the record. Well, it's a cover. We have kind of two covers, although one cover was not originally on this album, but Midnight Cowboy, the theme from the movie, just I think Roddy or somebody, or I'm sorry, Billy was obsessed with a station like a 50s and 60s kind of like oldie station in San Francisco, and just was listening to it constantly during this record, and so wanted to cover the instrumental originally by John Barry for the movie Midnight Cowboy 1969.
John Voight, Dustin Hoffman.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've seen it maybe a few times or whatever. It's country boy
I
moves
always-
to the city to
Yep.
have sex with women for money.
He's a gigolo, spending lots of dough.
It's an instrumental, but so you would think Mike wouldn't be on this, but he actually plays the melodica, which is like the piano looking thing with the thing you blow into.
Okay. That
Yeah.
that makes so much sense that he would, because there's a lot of Mr. Bungle and I'm gonna butcher the title of this band's name. Phantomos.
Oh yeah, Phantomos.
Phantomos. There's a lot of shows where he'll do that instrumentation.
Sure.
So
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, Phantomos is like also a very other strange thing. But yeah, I mean it's cool. But I also think that the Commodores cover they did, I'm glad they added it, because it's like, it was on the 93 re-release, like bonus track. I think basically everywhere else got this song besides us initially, but the States. So when I hear this, because it does literally just sound like Faith No More covering this song. Like they do it justice. They do it like how it was done before to me. But this feels like the more natural, organic close to the record. Aside from Midnight, the Midnight Cowboy theme, like just kind of sounds like a bit like, yeah, we'll just do this for fun.
It's like a bit.
Right. Yeah. Like this seems more
segue.
like a natural, like nice kind of bow on a very strange album, which in this, yeah.
Yeah. So like the easy cover, I didn't actually own a copy of Angel Dust till much later, but I bought a greatest hits comp called The Best Of, and I can see the cover in my head. But there's a different version of Easy on that greatest hits comp than there is on this full length record. So one version is referred to as the cool version, which is the version I heard on that greatest hits comp. And it's a little more sparse. It's just the standard instruments, bass, drums, keyboards, guitars, vocals. Whereas the one that's on the Angel Dust record has all the synths and keyboards and all the layers and everything. So, and the big difference is the in the middle of the track, which I think is so good. It's just like,
It's kind of an interesting choice too, and from what I understand, I mean, they had the War Pigs cover, previously. I think people who like to see this band probably were like all the, kind of Neanderthal type fans were like, oh, I'll play War Pigs, and then they replace it with something like this. I think they also used to cover a Bee Gees song. I started a joke, and so it's just like, yeah, no, this is what we're playing. This is what we're playing tonight. Enjoy it. It'll be fun.
In some of their late 2000 shows, when they got back together, I think they would go into a Poker Face cover before kicking into another track.
Oh yeah.
So like straight into it.
That's awesome.
The Lady Gaga song.
Yep.
So we talked about all the tracks on the album. Let's maybe talk about the artwork really briefly here. It's an awesome classic cover. Like I can't not think of this album cover when I think about this band, but the title Angel Dust basically being like, it's kind of a weird name for a drug that's like, so horrific. And yet it's like angel dust.
Yeah.
Like, and so you have this kind of really nice.
What did you just take? Just a little low grade PCP?
You have this really great, beautiful cover with like this, this bird on it. And then, it's like airbrushed blue. And then you turn the back cover is basically just like a cow on a meat hook, like a bunch of really fucked up looking shit, which I had not, like, I'd never had a physical copy of this record before. So like seeing that for the first time, I was like, oh, that's there. That's all that. That's very jarring. Yeah. Let's see it.
Oh, you mean that?
Yeah. And then
turn it around.
Oh, beautiful. It's
just
a cattle it's a cattle decapitation cover.
It's very reminiscent of a kind of a Carcass tribute band that was created or that released an album on Relapse called the County Medical Examiners. So the cover of the record was like a bunch of like pictures of autopsies and everything like that. So the back of it was obviously the same thing. So it's very Carcass-esque, and you would open the CD tray and the CD was scratch and sniff and it smelled like rotting meat.
You mentioned that. Funny thing about Carcass that I found in like listening to or watching all these interviews, they apparently loved Carcass, like Faith No More did.
Makes
they were playing
sense.
in Europe, and they were apparently, there was one show in particular where the interviewer were like, you guys were all wearing Carcass shirts. Like last night, what I saw, it was like, that's crazy. Like, I mean, I'm not surprised,
Yeah.
but like, it's just so cool. They're like, yeah, we're a Carcass
support group.
There, yes, that's the word.
It's needed.
But yeah, so the album artwork, you got all the songs. what is the reception of this record? Well, it sold fairly well in the first few months, 500,000 copies. So it ultimately goes gold in the US. And like we kind of mentioned, kind of trails off from there, but sold gangbusters overseas, millions of copies. So yeah, weirdly enough, it just, the real thing was the huge hit here. Maybe people in America were not ready for a record like this, or they were. I mean, we heard it in the label execs where they're like looking for the real thing part 2, and then they're just like they're fucking blowing up their whole career. They're like this isn't gonna, they're just trying to alienate folks to alienate them. They don't know what they're doing.
Maybe it wasn't the fans that would have had a problem with it. Maybe it was just the fact that some old fathead from like the record label was like, it's got to be this. Like the depiction. What's the cover of the Warrant album that's got like the big money holding like goofy bastard on it? Like all record execs looked like that at one point.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, if this would have came out in the 90s, there were so many weird acts being signed in the 90s that sold tons of albums. If this thing was promoted the way it was promoted in Europe, it would have been huge. Maybe to the band's, disappointment. They may not have wanted it to be that big. They may have wanted to be the band that could like, oh yeah, we're still putting out records, but we're putting out things we absolutely want. We don't have to answer to anybody. But there's tons of hooks and like catchy songs on this.
Yeah. I think here you kind of see where the band is like, certainly has like, I think they are a household name, certainly, but I think also they have like kind of this weird cult following because they're not like a traditional kind of band. They definitely approach things and experiment. And, they're one thing that this band is not a fan of is like kind of nostalgia acts. And so they kind of make a point to set themselves apart from the herd and the rock star mentality, which certainly comes into a lot of the touring that happened for this record, which they were not the fuck about. So record comes out, right? They get put on from May to July. They're on the Use Your Illusion tour with Guns N' Roses and Soundgarden. And so that kind of begins this relationship with Guns N' Roses. July through September 92, they're also on the Guns N' Roses Metallica Stadium Tour, the infamous Stadium Tour. The very one, which they were not the first pick of. I think Guns N' Roses initially wanted Nirvana to be the opener.
That's right.
Kurt Cobain refused to do that. So Faith No More comes on. But they also, the whole tour, and this will come in as we kind of wrap up this point, is that literally the entire time, interviews on stage, the antics that occurred, they were just like, basically like fuck Guns N' Roses. They were just dogging them in the press the whole time. So funny.
They were on, did they play the date that Hetfield got burnt in the pyro accident?
The Montreal riot, August 8th, 92. So yeah, he suffered the pyro incident. And of course, Axl Rose has like a fucking meltdown and they were setting fires like in the arena. So they were there for that. They ended up postponing it for a few dates. And then I think James, he just did vocals the rest of the tour with John Marshall.
Yes, yep,
from Metal Church. And I think he was a roadie and guitar tech as well.
Sure did.
Filling up on guitar. One thing that it was cool about this, since they do have that Metallica connection, there is maybe live footage. I would love to see it. I didn't actually look this up, but Jim Martin played the Misfits cover with them. They did like Last Caress for a night, but this was short-lived because they get fired from the tour. It turns out that if you talk incessant shit about a band for a while, then maybe they're going to have a problem with it, which I don't think they gave a shit either.
I'm just going to say this. Faith No More gets kicked off the bill for giving mainly Axl shit, because let's face it, that's where the problems stem from. I know for a fact that the other Bay Area band that was on that tour talked massive shit all throughout that tour and did shit to Axl throughout that whole tour. And they did not get kicked off for some reason.
Well, I mean, if you're the other headliner.
Maybe
yeah.
Maybe it's like maybe Axl's like, we got to kick off somebody.
Well, it's not going to be the other headliner.
Yeah, and Mike and the boys are like, we can go tour and do better things. We'll sit at home and get paid.
I have yet to watch the like tour doc that it's like a year in the life of Metallica that they did
there's
for this.
So much shit they make on Axl in that.
So you have one band touring for the Black Album. You have Use Your Illusion. So it's like, yeah, these bands are fucking massive. And then you have this record playing songs from this record to that crowd who just probably wants to hear fucking Enter Sandman or, November Rain or whatever. Like, just, yeah. So I'm sure it wasn't terribly fun. They were actually, I think one of the quotes that I saw from Billy was that they even had a discussion that they may have they were going to just leave and they decided against it. Like before they actually got fired, they were like, I don't think this is for us. Maybe we should just go. And then they decided to stay. And then it was like, oh no, we're leaving apparently. Like this has been made for us. They also had a couple headlining tours, United States with Helmet, which I believe that big record came out this year or in 92. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think.
Meantime?
May have been Meantime. I've seen them wearing, there's some of the interviews they're wearing, they have like the shirt. So love, they big friends with Helmet. They toured the US. One of the things that I found very interesting about this too, and it's featured on like the deluxe version of the album, is that they use some of the live audio from this tour. And weirdly enough, DeKalb, Illinois just featured right at and so I'm from the western suburbs, a little bit further west, DeKalb, NIU. I had my fucking prom where they played a show. It was so weird. I'm like, I tried to dance awkwardly with my date right here where Faith No More played with Helmet.
What song did you dance to, Austin?
I danced to RV.
No, I really want to know. What song did you dance to?
I don't fucking remember. Whatever hit.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting. They played Chicago. Then they just like had a date in DeKalb. And then they also played in Macomb, Western Illinois. Anyway, very interesting thing. I just thought it was funny. Like out of all of the, they toured the fuck out of this record, man. Then they did, I think they did a European tour with L7 too, because there's like a really great interview or like a little clip where L7 and Faith No More are like having breakfast together. And I guess Jim Martin was late for whatever ferry ride they were supposed to take. And they just fucking left him. Yeah. That was another part of this too, where, obviously the guy wasn't into the record overall, wasn't into the recording process or like the rehearsals. And then on tour, you read a lot of those articles and it's like, man, they are just at each other's throats. Like they're just talking, like just kind of passive aggressively flinging shit back at each other. So you wonder what it's like behind closed doors. But yeah, he would be late all the time, apparently. So he was just kind of not into it. So after the tour, they just let him go. And I haven't really seen it. He popped up at the
Metallica 30th
the
anniversary.
Metallica thing did.
Yep.
Yeah. So there was that part of it. And I think he was also like maybe he's a member of Infectious Grooves, and whenever that band's like
at one point
active.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just kind of like, I don't know what he does. I think he still writes shit for his own, but
there's a lot of photos online, like well after this, like a couple decades or a decade or so later, where he got really into like farming and he got into like growing these giant fucking vegetables. Like there's a photo of him with a giant fucking pumpkin.
Hell yeah.
Just like hair's gone, shaved completely, but like massive pumpkin.
That kind of wraps up the whole thing. It seemed like just a wild time recording this album. And I'm kind of surprised it came out the way it did, just based on like, you have one member who's kind of like not in it. You have all of these cameras on you the whole time. The record label's kind of like, standing over you, just like, we need a hit record. And you ultimately did get a hit record, but it's not what they envisioned it would be.
No.
And it seemed like this band had also kind of continued down this path of just like being very out there and experimental. I mean, I haven't listened to a lot of like the later stuff. Like I need to check out the follow-up record to this, which I think also had like kind of a tumultuous kind of recording process as well.
King for a Day is a really fun record. Album of the year, which is technically it's the album they did right before they split up. those are both really fun records. They're far more straightforward than this. Absolutely. They still don't sound like the real thing at all, but they're far more straightforward. There's a track on, I think Ashes to Ashes is on King for a Day. That's a really fun song. Huge chorus in it too. It's wild. Really shows Patton's range in that track. But you know, this kind of like movie scene just came to mind of describing this band putting out this record on a major label. There's the scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest is on that nationally broadcasted like late night show, and he walks out on the catwalk after it to like get a breath, and Lieutenant Dan's there in the wheelchair. And he goes, "They gave you an imbecile, a moron who goes on national TV and makes a fool out of himself, the Congressional Medal of Honor."
Yeah.
Yes, sir, they did.
They put this band on a major label.
A band is on a major label, releases what many consider to be like a daring step of a record to put out, and a record that has gone on to influence many artists. You know, Mike went on to do multiple different projects that were his throughout the years. Tomahawk, Phantomos, Mr. Bungle, still doing records with that. Just recently put out a new record technically with them. It's a re-recording of their original demo. He's done solo projects. I was a big fan of an album he put out in the early 2000s called Peeping Tom. That was like more like kind of hip hop oriented record. You know, he's extremely prolific. He's worked with Ipecac Recordings for many years. I think formed the label. Billy has gone on to do mixing and mastering and production work. I think Roddy's done the same thing. And once Jim left, it kind of became, for the King for a Day album, they ended up recruiting one of the guitar players that was in Mr. Bungle for a period of time.
Trey.
Trey, yes.
Yep.
And then I believe for the rest of the band's career, it's been, I can't remember his name at this point. It's not Trey.
Not Trey.
It's not Trey.
It's not
his
Trey.
name's not Trey.
Not Trey.
Hold on. Let me find his name so I can get that, because I don't want to
No, I feel you.
discredit the gentleman.
Yeah, it seemed like everybody was staying fairly busy, you know, like you mentioned, Mike doing all his different projects, you know, Mike Borden playing with like Ozzy and like all these different bands over the years. What Roddy composed music for several different things, one of which is the made for TV Fred movies. You know, famous Fred from YouTube. Everybody remembers Fred. Well, guess what? Roddy did the music for the Nickelodeon movies, as well as I'm Reed Fish, which I actually do like that movie.
John Hudson. John Hudson is their current guitar player, and he's been with them since Album of the Year.
Not Trey. Not Trey's
Trey.
been with, not Trey.
First name not,
and second name Trey. I love this record. I think it's fantastic. I think there's like you said, a great influence that's served. I mean, there's certainly people who have come out and, you know, just said how like it have a game changer it was. Like even Max Cavalera, I think, was like a huge supporter of this record. 100%.
Mike was on the Roots album.
This is true. Yeah,
Mike was on the Roots album.
Yep.
I think the first time I ever saw the Angel Dust album cover was there was an interview with either Revolver or Metal Hammer back when in like 05, 04 with Howard Jones from Killswitch Engage, and they asked him, "What's a big album that influenced you to sing the way you do?" And he goes, "Oh, Angel Dust from Faith No More." It's like, fuck, okay, I got to check into this at some point.
To, I guess, close the discussion, Swindle, as someone who really didn't listen to this record, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about it coming out on the other side of it?
Fucking weird. Weird album. Everything about it is weird. Like the vocals, all different, lots of different voices, all weird. His like singing is good. He's a really good singer. Like kind of like the midlife crisis style vocals. Those are really good. The bass is fucking wild in the entire album. There, like we mentioned, there's not much guitar. The drums are fine. The keyboards, they always kind of seem like the sound always seems a little out of place but I think that just adds to like the weirdness of the album.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was a fun listen.
Would you
Sick.
re-listen to it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ah.
I love weird music. So.
Oh, I know you be loving the weird shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Everybody's a weirdo.
Eh,
Everybody
we're
on
all
this
weird.
podcast is a fucking weirdo.
I'm not your dad, man. You're not mad at me.
What was the score of the Jets game? I think this record is a little. I think they could have trimmed the fat in some areas. I think it's like sometimes I feel like when you go through it, I'm like,
I don't think
It's
Crack
a li-
Hitler should have been on the record.
I think it's not a perfect record, but I think it's the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they could trim the fat a little bit
Yeah.
on it.
That's the one track that sticks out to me that you could go, that one didn't need to be on here. That could have been a B-side. And then you would have had a record. You don't even have to have the cover on the record, right? That could be something else entirely.
Yeah, I thought I love Easy as an ending to the record, but I also thought that the Midnight Cowboy thing is cool, but it feels like a band just kind of they're goofing around, right? And that's fun. I like it a lot, but I think I think getting through the album on a couple listens, I'm like, okay, I think maybe I like everything that's happening here. I like all the experimentation. I love how weird it fucking is. I do think it maybe could have been trimmed down or maybe like take off, Crack Hitler. But other than that, I think it's a fantastic fucking album. And, if we're comparing one record to the other, I think, I like The Real Thing, but this truly feels like the band, like this is who they actually are. This is like a personality, like an accurate depiction of what this band is about. So I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad we dove in and, went through everything. So if you haven't listened to this album yet, check it out.
We've reached that point of the episode, the end of it. Goodbye.
This is it. Done.
We've reached the recommendation portion of our episode. I'm going to start us off today. My rec for a new song is the song Persona by Gel. They just released the single this week, I think, and a new video. It's off of the EP called Persona that I think is coming out in like mid-August sometime. So I like that. Punk for freaks. I am a freak and I'm also a punk. So my second rec is an album from 2021, I think. Piecework by Kowloon Walled City. I liked that album, listened to it a few times a couple years ago, but I just got back into it. I listened to it again this week a few times. Detuned guitars, not very much like distortion or anything, a lot of reverb, but it's very post-metal-y, almost kind of Doom like the guitars, but not like overtly doomy. But split mates with Thou, of course. But check out Piecework by Kowloon Walled City.
I got a couple this week. One of them, not a metal record. A couple new singles from the band Chubby and the Gang. This is a London-based punk band. It's so cool. I love the first singles. I think I maybe got introduced to this band. They had a record a couple years ago called The Mutts Nuts, and that was great. And also one of the members, actually, this is like the solo project of Charlie Manning Walker, who's also a member of another English punk band called The Chisel. This person was on an episode of Hardlore too, so I like kind of got to dive into a little bit more of The Chisel. I love that. They had a record that came out as well, What a Fucking Nightmare, from this year. It's also very good. But Chubby and the Gang, they signed to Flat Spot Records, which you might know from like some of the hardcore bands that are coming out as of late. Buggin' put out a record through them, Speed, Karma. So then they have this record, which kind of like is just a really fun kind of like rock and roll record, kind of just old school sounding punk record. Reminds me of all the things I really loved about like the Ramones, even when I first heard it. But the first couple songs, the Bonnie Banks and To Be Young, definitely some like Thin Lizzy influence on some of this stuff. The album that's coming out, it's dropping October 4th through Flat Spot Records. And then there was, check out those singles. And then since, of course, we talked about Faith No More, I wanted to rec a band that Mike Patton is in that I really enjoy, Dead Cross, their second album, just literally titled 2 from 2022. This is a band with Mike Patton, Faith No More. We got Justin Pearson from The Locust and Retox, Michael Caine from Retox, and of course, Dave Lombardo, X-Slayer, fucking Mr. Bungle, and so many more. But very abrasive record, very heavy record, a lot of really fast, like kind of in your face shit. If you like just fun, kind of like, my brain wants to say thrashy, but it's really just like, I don't know. It's a great fucking record. So check it out.
So to add to the fun factor, I've got a new one and an old one. New one. For all the heavy music I listen to a lot of relatively serious shit. But I'm a big fan of just ignorant fucking heavy music from time to time. Oklahoma City's slam stalwarts, Peeling Flesh, has a new record coming out on Unique Leader Records on September 6th of this year. It's called The G Code. They just dropped 2 new singles within the last week, called Shoot to Kill, Perk 3 or Shoot to Kill is one single. The B-side is Perk 3000. It's slam, it's dumb, it's ignorant, it's great, it's fun. It's for, if you're a fan of bands like Snuffed on Sight and Ingested, you'll enjoy this shit. It's just ignorant, fun music. The record's like 26 minutes long. Like, it's just probably going to be full of samples and all sorts of shit. It's so much fun. But then I have an older one as well. I just recently read Mark Lanigan's memoirs, Sing Backwards and Weep, recently. And it's not necessarily a memoir on just like, it's not a typical band memoir. It's not like I toured for this long, I did these deviant things, I toured for longer. It's definitely much more a dive into being brought up in a maybe less than stellar home life, being able to find music, punk rock in particular, and then go on to have some sort of success in that music, and then be a full-blown addict during all this time and deal with all this stuff in multiple ways. But I was a fan of his first solo record that was put out through Sub Pop many years ago, and I recently got a chance to finally dig into his second record called Whiskey for the Holy Ghost. It came out in 1994 on Sub Pop Records, and it might be my favorite of his solo records I've heard. The man has sounded like a 70-year-old man since he started singing. His solo stuff sounds vastly different than the Screaming Trees stuff. That's a little bit more like Rolling Stones kind of rock and roll, a little bit of psychedelia with that. Whereas his solo stuff is very Tom Waits, Nick Cave, very on the downtrodden, very bluesy almost. The dude's voice to me is great. I like that kind of gravelly, rough baritone voice he's got. And I fucking love the record. If you need something to like chill out to and listen to, if you're listening to heavy music like we all do quite a bit, definitely put on something like that and just zone out because it's great. Take an edible, listen to it, travel through fucking time and dance with the devil. Shit is fun.
Check it all out. Thanks again for joining us this week on our episode discussing Angel Dust. If you want to follow us for any updates on the show at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Dylan does reviews every Friday. We got a fun one I'm sure will be coming out. So you want to get into like some more like newer releases and follow that sort of thing. Just listen to what the old bald dome has to say. We also have our official playlist, Riffs on Repeat, Hits from the Crypt. Those are available in the links below in the description. If you got Apple Music, if you got Spotify, there's definitely both of those that we update pretty frequently and regularly. So check those out. If you want to tell us how we're doing, we also have an email. If you want to reach out, say hey, ask any questions, or tell us how we're fucking up, riffworshippod@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe and give us a review. I ain't trying to get a real job, so you're going to help us out. That would be very much appreciated. But I guess until then, we'll be back next week with a whole new episode, maybe a guest. I don't know. We'll see. But until then, I'm Austin. That's Swindle, and that's Dylan. And you've been listening to Riff Worship. Bye.
Bye.